It's that time again. Time to enter the strange world of the paranormal. And tonight, I want to take you to an old house on the edge of a picturesque village. For obvious reasons, I'll not identify the village, as the present owners of the house wish to remain anonymous. Anyway, the house is in fact an old vicarage, although the church which used to stand next door has long been demolished, and the graveyard has been deconsecrated and removed. About 5 years ago, the present owners moved into the house, which was in a rather dilapidated state and needed a lot of work doing on it. Let me describe the house. It was a large early Victorian building on 3 floors with extensive cellars under it. It's set in secluded grounds surrounded by big oak and elm trees. What is now the main lawn used to be the graveyard. During the course of renovation work, the couple who had bought the house found an old picture tucked away in the corner of one of the cellars. It was of a rural scene, with hills in the background and a stream running through the middle of a patch of trees. In one corner was an old church. The picture itself was not particularly remarkable, but the couple thought that it would fill a large space on one of the walls downstairs. So next day, they took it to a picture restorer to have it cleaned and reframed. And then they got on with the business of restoring the house to its former glory. Well, it took them over a year to complete all the work on the house, but when they'd finished, they were justifiably proud of their efforts. And the picture which they had found in the cellar had cleaned up so well that they decided to put it over the fireplace in the main sitting room. 2 nights after they had hung the picture in the sitting room, the couple were asleep in bed when, at about 2:30 a.m., they were awoken by a crash. Thinking that they had burglars, the man put on his dressing gown and went downstairs to investigate. After a thorough search, he found no signs of a break-in, but what he did find was that the picture hanging on the sitting room wall had come off the wall and was lying on the floor near the middle of the room. He thought that it had perhaps sort of bounced there, but he didn't dwell on it too much. He just put the picture back on the wall and went back to bed. About 20 minutes later, there was another crash, and again the man went to investigate. Only this time, he went into the sitting room first in case the picture had fallen down again. And sure enough, it had. So he picked it up, and thinking that there must be a weakness in the wall, he propped the picture up against the window and retired to bed again. There were no more disturbances that night. The next morning, which incidentally was a Saturday, the man checked the hanging of the picture, and although he found nothing wrong with either the hook in the wall or on the frame, he changed them for stronger fixings just in case. He then hung the picture back over the fireplace. But as he was adjusting the picture, he noticed a mark in the middle of it, like a sort of smudge. It wasn't on the glass. It was actually on the picture itself. Thinking that perhaps there was a fungus or something growing on the picture, he decided to take it back to the restorer to have it put right, which he did 2 days later. When the man went to collect the picture from the restorer, he was told that there was nothing organically wrong with the picture. There was no evidence of fungal growth or decay, but he also was mystified by the dark smudge in the center of the picture. He could only describe it as a sort of after-image caused by perhaps being painted over many years ago, and the restoration work had maybe removed a layer of paint and revealed it. Although he couldn't understand why he had not noticed it when he had done the original work on it, he nevertheless offered to x-ray the picture, but the man decided that it wasn't important, and in any case it was too expensive for what it was worth. However, he did ask the restorer to see if he could find out who painted it, just for curiosity. Several weeks later, during which time there had been no disturbances in the house, the man was informed by the picture restorer that his painting was by a lesser-known Victorian artist named Peter Temple, and the picture was called Mistress Hoxley. It was only worth a couple of £100. That night, the couple were again woken by the crash. And this time, they immediately knew that it was the picture falling off the wall. When the man went downstairs, he found that they were right, or at least nearly right. Because this time, he found that the picture was in the corner of the room, as if it had been thrown there by an unseen force. And when the man went to pick it up, he noticed that the strange smudge in the middle of it had grown and had taken on a definite shape. In fact, it was as if it had been freshly painted there. The detail was so good. It was of a small figure, an old woman, dressed in 17th century clothes. She was looking out of the picture as if over her shoulder, and at her feet was what looked like a small animal, a cat, for example. For some unaccountable reason, as the man looked at the figure, he experienced a feeling of fear. But he took no notice of it. He just put the picture against the chair again and turned to leave the room. But as he crossed the floor, he was suddenly brought to an abrupt stop by the sight of a woman standing by the door. At first he thought it was his wife, but he rapidly knew this was not the case. For the woman was small, about 5 feet tall, and was dressed in strange clothes reminiscent of the 17th century. And at her feet was a black cat. She was surrounded by a reddish glow which seemed to throb like a heartbeat. He demanded who she was, but he got no reply. He was about to speak again when, quite without warning, the cat, which was sitting quietly at the woman's feet, suddenly jumped at the man. It landed on his arm and sank its teeth into his dressing gown. If the material hadn't been so thick, it would have caused a nasty injury. As it was, the cat's teeth just grazed the flesh. The old woman then seemed to say something to the man, and both she and her cat just disappeared. When the man had recovered from the shock, he staggered upstairs, not really believing the evidence of his own eyes. He told his wife nothing of what had just happened, and by the next morning he mentally put it down to a nightmare. Until, that is, he found a tear in the sleeve of his dressing gown and 2 small pinpricks on his forearm, like teeth marks. The man was determined to find out what was going on. So at the first opportunity, he consulted the local vicar, and on the pretext of local research, asked if he could have a look through the old parish records. And there, under the date the 18th of September, 1675, he found an entry which recorded the death of one Mistress Edith Hoxley, who had died in the course of an investigation into whether she was a witch or not. She had been buried just outside the confines of the church graveyard in unconsecrated ground. It was also recorded there, as she had actually died under interrogation, it was determined that she had been innocent. Armed with this information, the man then went to the local newspaper and found out by looking through the old issues that in 1901, the church was supposed to have been haunted by the ghost of a woman who had been killed in 1675 as a witch. The locals refused to worship there, and eventually the church was deconsecrated and demolished. The disturbances continued at the house, and they got so bad that even the couple's children began to ask who the old woman was who woke them in the middle of the night and scared them. Finally, the man decided to get rid of the picture, as he was convinced that it was the cause of all the trouble. So he sent it to the local auction rooms. And after that, nothing more happened. Except, that is, until he came downstairs one morning and found, scrawled over the mirror which he had put on the wall in place of the picture, some spidery writing, which spelled out the name, Hoxley. And in the center of the mirror, he noticed a small, dark smudge, not unlike the figure of an old woman with a cat at her feet. It has defied all attempts to remove it, and serves as a constant reminder of the time that the family came into contact with someone or something not of this world. And the picture? Well, it was sold at the auction, and its whereabouts are now unknown. But if you ever come across an old painting depicting a rural scene with a church in one corner and the figure of an old woman and her cat, check who painted it and what the name of the picture is. If it's called Mistress Hoxley by Peter Temple, Take care. You might be getting more than you paid for.